Go.
Right.
Hi everyone, I'm Archip,
Hey, I'm Akash.
and together we're part of Junior Coding League, and today we're going to be going over HTML basics. The purpose of this course is to get you started with web development. So, the internet is one of the biggest resources out there with over 1 billion sites. And so this course is meant to help you get started developing those web apps and also, giving back to your community by developing those applications.
Yep.
Um, so let's get started with all of this. So first off, what you're going to need is a text editor. The text editor I use is Atom, but if you're on Windows, you can also use, Notepad, Notepad++, or, the built-in text editor. And if you're on Mac, you can use like TextEdit. But I just use Atom because it automatically highlights your code. To install it, you can go on atom.io and then click download, and then it should get set up. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to assume you have something installed already. So to start off, the first thing you want to do is, select where you want to save your file, and then call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it intro and end it with a .html. So we have our intro.html here, and we're going to start off with the HTML tag. So Akash, you want to explain a bit more what tags are on HTML and like what?
So essentially, tags are you're telling the computer what this section of code will be. So by putting the HTML tag around this part, we're telling the entire thing, or we're telling the computer that this entire section is all in HTML. So that's essentially what we have to do at the start. And then once you get into headers and body tags, we're also going to have to start doing specific tags for that.
Yeah, exactly. And so HTML tags have a very specific format, right? And like tags are, what the browser uses. So like when you use like Google Chrome, it's what like Google Chrome uses to display your website. So basically we have a basic format for tags, and how the format works is you have a less than sign, the name of the tag, and the greater than sign to open your tag. And to close your tag, you have the same format, but you have a slash right in front of the tag name. So in this case, we have the HTML tag, and that just tells our browser that everything inside these two tags will be HTML code, right? So we have the HTML tag, and then we have inside the HTML a head tag and a, so we close our head tag like that, and then we have a body tag, and we close our body tag like.
So essentially what the head tag is where you kind of import everything that you need to do for the program. So this is kind of at the start of the program where everything you'll use later. And then the body is basically where all your main code will go. So this will be where the actual site, all the aesthetics and everything that you actually put in will be.
Right, exactly. And so, up here we have a doc type HTML statement, just tells like our code, or our computer, that this is an HTML file. We don't have to do it, but it's just convention to do it. Yeah, so as Akash said, in the head, we have sort of the import statements, all of our CSS and JavaScript, most of it is in the head. And we also have the title of our website, so title. So the title of your website is what shows up when somebody opens it in a new tab. So let's say if we open up Safari and go to google.com, or sorry, let's open up Chrome and go to google.com, you'll see right here in the top, it says Google, right? So in this case, the title of the page is Google. If we were to go to any other site, whatever shows up right here would be our title. And so in this case, I'm just going to call it basic web page. So if I were to go to where I've saved this in my desktop right here and open with Chrome, right now we'd have a blank page, but our title up here is basic web page, and I actually misspelled that. But our title would be basic web page. So our head is, basically where we import our JavaScript and our CSS. And the purpose of those languages is to tie in with our HTML. And so to kind of break it down, whenever you do web development, like create a web page, there's 3 languages that you use, and those are HTML, which is for putting everything down and structuring everything, CSS, which is for the styling and making your website look better, and JavaScript, which is for all the functionality, like coding certain aspects of the site depending on what the user does and how the user interacts with it. And so that can sound a bit complicated if you've never heard of this before. So our purpose today is to break it down, right? Today we're going to be getting into a lot of the HTML and a little bit of the CSS and not too much of the JavaScript. And in the next few lessons, we're going to expand on CSS and JavaScript. So the first tag we're going to talk about inside the body is the H1 tag. So Akash, can you explain a bit more about H1?
So essentially in a website, you're going to have a header, which will tell basically everybody what's going to go on in the website. So H1 is essentially the largest tag. So, and then if you increase the size, so H2, H3, H4, then it'll get smaller. So H1 is usually the first tag people put because that's the first header that you want to put for your entire website.
Yeah, exactly. So like, think of it like headings and subheadings in an article, right? H1 is going to be your main heading, like the title of your website. And then your H2 is going to be like a subheading, like maybe a smaller topic within your website and all of that. So if I do my first website here, and then we open our site, then as you can see right here, we have my first website in big bold text, and on the, we can actually reload this and we'll get the same result. And on the title page, we still have basic web page, right? And so to see, you know, whenever you have code to see the output, all you need to do is keep this file open and keep reloading it. So then whenever we make changes, it just automatically updates onto here. So, you know, we have our H1 tag, but, you know, we have to move it to the center of the screen, for example, right? And so HTML has a lot of tags built in. One of the ones that can help us do that is the center tag. And so what that's going to do is automatically align our title in the center of the screen. But you see, this is where we can incorporate a bit of CSS, right? And I kind of want to jump into something called attributes, right? So the way that HTML works is you have built-in tags like H1, center, body, head. And, you know, body is where you put all of your site's content. Head is where you import everything and put in everything that's necessary for the site to function. But basically, you have a bunch of tags, but what you can do is add on to tags and change the way that they work. And so you can customize each tag. And the way you do that is by using something called attributes. So the first attribute I want to talk about is style, right? And style is something that every single element attribute, so every single thing that you're putting on your site has the style attribute built in. And what that allows you to do is put in CSS into your element. So in this case, we can put in CSS and say color blue. And what will happen is our title will automatically become blue. And so the way that CSS works is you have built-in things that you can change about the element, like color, font size, background color, and then you put a colon, and then you put, you know, whatever color you want it to be, whatever size you want it to be, all of that. So, you know, so far we've covered the head, the title, the body, center, H1, and the HTML tag itself, right? So quick review, HTML tag is what all of your HTML goes in between, right? Including where you put in your JavaScript and CSS. Your head tag is where you put in most of your JavaScript and CSS when you have external files or you want to affect the whole document, you put in your title there. Your body is where you put in all of your elements. And then we have the center and H1 tags as examples for text. And then we have the style attribute, which lets us customize H1 and make it blue or, you know, a bigger font size. So what we can do is font size 100 pixels, right? And if we reload, our title is going to be 100 pixels or much, much bigger than it is already. So now let's get into the concept of reactivity, right? And so what that means is people are opening their websites on, you know, everything, right? From laptops that are as big as mine to phones that have much, much smaller screens. And so what we want to do with our website is make it look good on both the laptop and the phone. And to do that, CSS has something built in called Viewport Width and Viewport Height. And, you know, that's a fancy way of saying percent height and percent screen, percent width. So what we can do is we can put in like 10 VH right here. And if we reload, what this means is this text will always take up 10% of the height of our screen. So if we're on a laptop, it'll take up 10%, but if we're on a phone, it will still only take up 10%. And that's just something we use to make sure our website looks good on laptops and phones, because 100 pixels on a laptop will take up much less of a screen than 100 pixels on a phone. So, you know, it just automatically scales the text or the elements based on what we're viewing. So, you know, we've said the word elements a lot. Akash, you want to explain like what an element is in HTML?
So essentially an element is like anything that you put on the website. So like it could be the heading here, or it could be a paragraph that you write, or it could legitimately be like anything that you put on your website. So as we go through, we're going to learn a lot more of the tags. So like H1 is the first one, but there are going to be a lot more elements that you learn later on. So yeah, basically they're just anything that you have on the site.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, there's a bunch of different elements you can have as you move on. You can have buttons, text boxes, you know, navigation bars. And so those are all things we're going to learn to build into our website throughout this course. But, you know, today our main focus is just getting the basic elements and the basic concept of HTML out there, right? And so, you know, we did this basic demo to show you a bit about HTML, right? HTML is really different from a lot of programming languages because it's a markup language. And what that means is all you're essentially doing in HTML is structuring different elements, placing them in different areas, and making your site like the bare bones of your site. And then you can use things like the style attribute and CSS to modify your website. And so what I want to do next is show you some of the power of CSS, right? So we already made an H1 of my first website. Let's create an H2 saying, or let's create another H1 saying, this is pretty cool. So we've created another H1 saying this is pretty cool. But you'll notice that our first H1 is really big and really blue, but our second one is much smaller and black, right? So let's say we wanted to make all of our H1s blue automatically. Instead of copy pasting this attribute over and over again, we can just put in CSS in the head of our HTML file and do it all at once. So to show that we're using CSS, we use the style tag. So style, and then we can do H1 to say that we're affecting all H1s, and then say that color will be blue. And what we can do is we can actually delete this. We can delete the color blue from here because it's already affecting all H1s. And then if we were to reload our site, we can see all our H1s are blue automatically. And so no matter how many H1s I put in now, I can put in H1 high, they're all going to be blue automatically, right? We don't have to worry about doing it over and over again. And that's the power of CSS. You can automatically define how you want your elements to be without having to do it to every single element. We've done an example where we've shown, you know, how to modify H1s, and we've done H1s. So now let's move into more text on the document, right? So in addition to our H1s and our style, another thing we have to look into is paragraph tags and smaller H tags. So let's just look at what smaller H tags would look like. So H2 or H3, and let's do an H4. So we have our H1, H2, H3, H4, and as you can see, they like get smaller in size, right? So all the way from our H1 to our H2 to our H3 to our H4, and like we said, that just helps you show, you know, headings, subheadings, and all of that. But as you can see, the H1 has a built-in size, right? And we've modified that size up here. So sometimes what you want to do is modify it for certain elements and not others, right? So let's say you were creating a magazine, right? So what you might want is to have certain H2s in the magazine, certain subheadings bigger than others, right? So let's say you want all the subheadings for science to be bigger than all the subheadings for an entertainment article. Or let's say you want all these subheadings for a science article to be green and all the subheadings for an entertainment article to be red. That way viewers can quickly flip through and look at the science articles and the entertainment articles and see the difference, right? Because science will be green headings and the entertainment will be red headings. And so CSS also has something built into it for that, and it's called classes, right? And classes are ways to group objects. So Akash, you want to talk a bit more about, classes?
So essentially classes would be divided parts of your code. So what you do is you would have a div tag. And essentially what a div tag is it tells that computer that this is one division of your website. So with the div tag, you can actually separate like literally anything you want. So let's say I have a website that has different YouTube videos, and I could have a div tag to separate everything in one section or one style of content. And then I can affect only those videos. So as you build your websites and they get longer and you have different sections and they're more complicated, using div tags is actually a really powerful way to affect only one section of that, but not affect everything else. So this makes it a lot more efficient and a lot easier to change a single part of your section without changing everything else.
Yeah. So there's really two ways of, making that change in your website. So one is, grouping things together with like a div tag, like Akash said, and that's something I can show you right now. So let's say we want all of these in a div. So I can say div, div, and we'll indent all of these to just show that they're inside the div. And I can do style equals background color blue, right? And these are just, again, built-in keywords into CSS. We have background color, font size, color, and a whole host of others. What you can do to learn more about them is just, follow along and, obviously learn more. But if you also want to modify a specific aspect of an element with CSS, it's more than likely going to be built into CSS. So you can, just Google how to change this part of an element with CSS, and you'll find the necessary keywords to do that. So, but in this case, we made the background color for our div blue, and this text is blue already, so it blends in. But by doing that, we can automatically, affect a grouping of objects, right? That might be different. But another way to do that is through something called a class, right? And classes are ways to group together a bunch of objects. If you've used classes before in other programming languages, you know that they have a similar purpose there, right? They create a whole host of similar objects. And that's what we're doing here. So to show that we're creating a class in CSS, we put in a period and then we name our class, right? So let's say we're creating, back to the magazine article, a science class, and all of our science headers will be, green. So we do .science, and then that, gives us the science class, and we say color green. And so now what we can do, let's say we want to make them a certain font size, 2VH, so 2% of our screen. So now what we can do is say class equals science, and do it again for all of these, class equals science, or at least the ones we want to. And so that's going to automatically apply this CSS right here. It's going to automatically apply that CSS to every single science class. And so classes are really powerful because we no longer have to copy paste this into a style attribute like this multiple times. Instead, we just have to type in one word, and that's science, right? So if we were to save this, reload here, what you can see is we have the green 2% of our screen science class subheading. So let's actually make those bigger so they're easier to see. So we have our, our green highs, which would be like our science sort of subheadings. And so, right now these are pretty basic things, just changing the size of text on a screen, changing the color of text on a screen. And it's really pretty simple. But the most interesting thing about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is that once you get more advanced and start incorporating more things into your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can get much, much better and more interesting results, right? Because every single website on the internet is built with these three languages at its core, right? And so by layering them on top of each other and by using the inherent attributes of each of these languages, you can end up with some really cool results. Like, for example, right, the Junior Coding League website itself, right? It's all built in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we have, sure, a bit more advanced sort of events and code in place. But at the end of the day, it boils down to layering CSS and HTML on top of each other to get a pretty cool result. And so in future videos, we're going to be teaching you how to make text fade up like this, and how to just create sort of different sections of your site using divs. But at the end of the day, what we want to get out there is by doing really simple things like changing text color, or by organizing things together with the div, by creating classes, you can end up with really great results. And so, that sort of covers our first lesson. What we want you to do is, work with CSS, work with HTML, and sort of work on, using different attributes of CSS and HTML to sort of get them working together. But, the goal of this lesson was just to give you a quick taste of HTML and CSS, so that you guys can see how it works, how it operates, and then, learn to start incorporating them. In future videos, we're going to get into more tags, more attributes, more CSS tricks. But in this video, we just wanted to give you a basic rundown as to the most basic concepts in HTML and CSS and how to create a very, very basic website. So with that, thanks for watching. And we'll upload our next video talking more about HTML tags and attributes very soon.
Peace out, homies.
Wait,
Yo, it's still recording.
I stop recording.
Can you stop recording?